I pay or should you pay? And he said, we'd get dinner. And we thought, that's better than paying. So all the assistants to the quilt makers, please stand. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Georgianne Bissett. I'm the director, and I've got this wonderful job of working with creative, talented, and energetic people. And I'm so thrilled for this quilt exhibit. It is absolutely outstanding. Before I introduce Catherine, I just want to thank our sponsors. Is Michelle here from Rainbow's Inn?
No.
No. Is anyone that works with her here? Rainbow's Inn. I know all of you have been to Rainbow's Inn, right?
Yeah.
Good. Is there a person in this room that's not been there?
Betty went there this afternoon.
Oh, you went there this afternoon. And I want all of the quilters from IQ, Innovative Quilters, to please stand. I know there's lots of you in this room. They are our other sponsors, as well as people like the Intels, who I don't see here, our Founders Circle and our President's Circle. To hold an exhibit like this, it takes a whole village. Actually, it takes almost a nation. And we thank you all very much for coming. And Catherine Bergman, come on up, Catherine. Catherine is our curator and director of adult education. And she and Ann Felchu isn't here this evening, but they hung this magnificent show. So I'm going to turn it over to me.
Thank you, Georgianne. Yes, Ann and I have the envious job of unveiling and touching the works. It really is a privilege, and always Christmas. Every exhibit change, it's Christmas. We have this year the Quilt National. For many of you who've been coming to our biannual quilt exhibits, we've had the new quilts from an old favorite from the National Quilt Museum, formerly the American Quilter Society. That's a tough one, but that's an international competition. And this year, for the first time, we have a selection of quilts from the Quilt National, which comes out of the Dairy Barn Art Center in Athens, Ohio. So, in addition to the amazing small quilts and quilt challenges, the masterpiece artworks that our IQ quilters made that you can see in the hallway, we have, and Betty, so we have the three fabulous components to this year's quilt exhibits, and I'm so glad you're here tonight, and we are indeed privileged to have Betty with us, and she is so easygoing. I saw her work, and I gave her, shot her a quick email, and it was so effortless. We invited her, and she was so eager and happy to come be with us, so we are indeed honored. We have a great sign-up for tomorrow's Saturday and Sunday's quilt workshops. A workshop with Betty and Gail, her friend is along, her workshop assistant. Betty, some of you may be familiar with her background, but she actually studied at the Rhode Island School of Design, majoring in ceramics. And then she went on to open a tile company in Los Angeles, a very successful ceramic tile company. And then, as I read in her bio, when she became a mom, she moved to New Mexico to raise her son, and that is when her quilt career began. But of all of the quilts that I've seen come through the Art Center, and I've been here now 14 years, I'm really speechless before these quilts. They're just beautiful. And you might know that she has has a whole other body of work, and probably several, but I noticed in high contrast to these are her works that are landscapes, and so pictorials. So there's a whole other side, and others I'm sure that we don't see represented here. But I thank everyone who's here present. I thank our innovative quilters who have been the dearest friends to the Art Center and so giving and supportive over the years. Enjoy the quilts, and come on up here, Betty.
Now, I have one on me. Is that okay without this? Or would you like this also? Is that okay, everyone?
Yes.
Well, Innovative Quilters, is this your display in the hall? Oh, beautiful work. And very interesting theme. It was on Masters, inspired by Masters. Very nice. This is a wonderful privilege, and it is fantastic to see fiber art mounted in a gallery in this kind of situation. And I'm speaking of the Quilt National show too. It looks beautiful, you know, they're beautifully hung, and it's a wonderful environment. Now, I did go to art school, as Catherine said, and I have experienced pretty much most kinds of art snobbery. And a lot of it's just coming from the artists and the sculptors, you know, the bronze casters and the marble chippers and the oil painters assume that they're above everyone, and there's various hierarchies of levels below them. But when I was in school, there were two guys that really worked hard that were in some of the lesser arts. One of them was Dale Chicouli, and the other was Chris Van Allsburg. So, and they have been incredibly successful, and it doesn't matter where they are on their hierarchy, because their hard work and their talent made them the successes that they are. And I really think that there's no substitute for not letting anything hold you back. You know, don't let the fact that it's made out of cotton hold you back. You know, really try and express yourself as much as you can. Now, I don't want to drone on by myself for an hour, and I would welcome any questions that you have. But I did want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for a lot of this stuff. I have always enjoyed science. I really enjoyed biology when I was in school. And I just think that the natural patterns are amazing. We have a fractal show that is at our planetarium, where they show them on the ceiling, and you know, they mutate them and enlarge them, and that really blew my mind, because going back to those natural patterns that are kind of the same no matter what scale you make them, that's really what a lot of this is about. And a lot of this is, you know, just kind of taking the same pattern and just repeating it, and with the color variations to really tell the story. Do you mind if I walk around? Will you turn your neck so hard that they break? A lot of the things I do stem from other things. This piece in the back is when I was experimenting with felting. I love the way that wool looks when you get it wet and stretch it out, because the fibers look just like pictures of tissue, you know, the way that they stretch over things. So this whole center is felted, and you can see it's really three-dimensional, and it's made separately, this kind of leaf-shaped piece in the center, it's made separately and sewed onto this piece in the back. So it's two separate quilts. So I thought that was kind of cool. So I took pictures of the center part, And I put them in the computer and I played around and I made this. So can you see that this is the same pattern? Now this is a print of the photo of that. But it's been photoshopped, and again, this is, the center part is made separately, and it's on a piece of felt, so it's double thickness, and then it's sewn onto this, appliqued onto this, this quilt in the back. So I really, I've been utilizing the printing process quite a bit, but it's always in conjunction with painting, and it's in conjunction with making marks on it afterward. This one here is a print of a painting that I made, but it has all kinds of things on top. I get the actual fabric in, and I'll sew it, and then I'll paint it, or I'll stencil on it. There's some paint stick on here. So there's a lot of different materials on that. And then I do have things in the Quilt National, the 11 that is touring. My thing is not in this particular touring part. But this one and the one directly across from it are ones that I made in the same series. And this is combining just the textures and the colors are telling the story. So this is combining a non-woven material that's cut with a hot knife, and it's laid on top of some hand-dyed cotton sateen. And I wanted the two pieces to kind of communicate with each other, and I wanted the different color stories to be opposite on each side. So you can see that we have the orange and blue starting off here, which is segueing into red and green. And the same over here, it's starting on red and green on this side, but it's opposite. You have red background and green on top, and this you have green background, red on top. So, and then for a central point, just the gradation in sizes of these circles, create a little bit of tension. But that's how I wanted to tell the story, is really very subtly with the differences in the colors and the sizes of the pattern. And that little guy across the way is my tribute to all the tentacled animals of the ocean. He's kind of a generic one because I love them all. And he was originally intended to be an anemone, but it was so fun making all the circles that he became kind of a fantasy creature. What can I say? He was a lot of fun. Yes?
Trying to understand as you go along, is there a machine that cuts those holes, or you cut them?
I am a machine.
So you just have this big piece of fabric that you graded colors.
Well, I start off with dyeing the background fabric.
Right.
So that's dyed. This is cotton sateen. It's dyed regular Pochon dyes. And then I take the non-woven material and paint it.
Oh, so is it felt?
It's not felt, it's one I discovered. I tried Luchador, I tried every interfacing known to man. And this is one I discovered, which is used in textile conservation. It's sold by a museum conservation company. And they use it in, it's a non-woven spun polyester, and they use it in textile conservation. They back antique textiles with it. They use it to wash textiles. You can lay the textiles on it and dip it in water. So it's completely inert and acid-free and all that. And that is a big thing, as far as I'm concerned, is having your work be durable. I want all the materials in it to last. Did you have another question?
Well, you answered it. I was going to ask what non-woven material you were using.
Yeah. So the brand name is Renee. I do have several different ones that I use, but it is, you know, non-woven spun polyester. And these, sometimes I'll cut it out with scissors or, you know, a pattern and cut it out. These are all cut out with a hot knife because I like that really organic flow that you can get because you're using the knife and you use it, it's completely multi-directional. You know how when you cut with the scissors, it wants to go in one way until you turn it? Well, a hot knife can go in any direction that you want, just like a ballpoint pen. So you can get very organic shapes and vary them as you want. The downside is you can't really be very precise. So you do have to, you know, take some, you know, be willing to kind of go with the flow and, you know, make one shape fit into the other and all that. If you want something really accurate, you have to use the scissors or X-Acto knife or something. Yes?
Question, because it's polyester, what did you use to color it? Did you use a paint or?
I just paint it. I paint it with acrylics.
Paint it with acrylics?
You can use acrylics. You can use a thicker kind of fabric paint. You don't want to use a really thin one, but you can use a thicker one like Lumiere paints. Something that's the thickness of a regular artist acrylic paint because I should have brought a sample, but it's very thin, very, you know, kind of transparent. So when you paint it, the paint will go all the way through and kind of coat both sides. So
So you paint it and then you cut it?
paint it, then you put fusible on it,
Oh, okay,
then you cut it.
okay.
But the reason that I like to use it is because it is almost the same as, and I kind of visualize it, is transferring your brush strokes to the fabric without having to actually paint on the fabric. Number one, because I kind of don't like the way acrylic is on fabric.
Right.
And number two, you can move it around. I'm very big into doing things kind of improvisationally. You'll rarely see me make a sketch and you know, follow a plan. I'll put a square thing up on the wall and then manipulate the colors around and manipulate the shapes and everything.
So you're just building off of your internal memories of photographs that you've seen in natural things and of the scientific photographs that you've seen?
Most everything here is, except for a couple of things. Thank you for bringing that up. This piece over here is called growth factor. And what this is a diagram of the half of a plant stem. You know, when you slice it and you look at it under the microscope. And I had it printed out and in a mirror image. And of course I colored it and everything. And then I appliqued this stuff on the top because I was thinking, you know that part in 2001: A Space Odyssey? At the end where he's going into the future and the planes are kind of coming at him. So that's what I was trying to think of. Most of my work is trying to depict some kind of process or some kind of motion. And then the other piece that I have that is more representational is that piece in the very back. This one, and I did it on purpose because mostly I will draw things that are like these concentric circles, and I got kind of tired of the big eyeball everywhere. So this is a diagram of the Purkinje cells that go around your heart. They're Purkinje fibers. And what they do is they have tell your heart to beat, you know, what rhythm to beat, you know, the both sides get beating correctly. They're a nerve. They're called fibers. I'm not sure if they're nerve ending or not. But yes.
You talk about printing parts of these things.
Okay, that's printed. That's original. That's printed. Yes.
And it's about 2.5, 3 feet wide. Do you have like a huge printer?
I do not. I send them out. I send them. Yes. I send them out because I want them to be durable. You know, and they're using commercial inks, and it's much more durable than using an inkjet on a home printer. Even if I had a big printer, I wouldn't do it. I would send it out.
You print it on paper, you print it on fabric?
No, they're printed on fabric.
On fabric, and then
And they will print on, there are many different kinds of fabric. A lot of these are printed on silk, which, and this you can see gives you a very vibrant color. And my theory, and the reason that I like to use silk is I had a teacher tell me one time that was, you know, talking about multimedia on quilts. She said, you know, think of all those old master paintings. They're on canvas. They are paint on canvas. And you know why they get their luminousness is because the canvas is gesso. So the canvas has a white reflective surface on it. Silk does the same thing. It's not the shine so much as the luster. So the light rays go behind the ink that's on the surface and they bounce back at you. So you get more of a vibrant tone than you would just with cotton. For instance, this background on this is cotton. And you can see it has a much more dusty feel. It doesn't have the depth that the silk does. So, yes.
Why the red one?
We are honored to have Marianne R. Williamson here from Miami. And she is a world-famous quilter headed down to Brazil to do workshops. So thank you so much for coming. So what question did you have?
Talk about the red one behind you.
Oh, these? Yeah. We talked about those at my house. No? Well, anyway. These two are part of the series, as you can see. And they're similar to that long, skinny one over there, in that they are paintings of mine, and the paintings are about this big, that I took a picture of and I had printed out. And they will go to 52 inches wide, depending on the material that you pick. So I had these printed out, and of course you can see they're a little bit different colorways, and I heavily photoshopped it too. I changed the colors around. But these are both printed out, and then they had things done to them. So they started out as the same thing. These are from the same painting. And this is actually there's one more. Anyway, neither one of these is the original, but I did one, and I thought, maybe I could do something else. So then I did another one, and then another one, which I do a lot. But that is, this I think is the same. Anyway, I made kind of a brighter colorway for this one. And in the quilting, and when I do the quilting, I will also do surface decoration as I'm quilting. The traditional quilting approach is you have to pick your fabrics out, and they have to all go together perfectly. You have to sew them together perfectly, and then you have to quilt them perfectly. And it's step, step, step. And I reverse that all the time. I will quilt it, and then I'll sew on it some more. I will quilt it, and then I will paint on it. And then I'll put something else on the top. Or if the color isn't right, I can paint a whole section. Because think of a painter, an oil painter, because they're so fabulous. Yes, they can, put their painting up on the wall and completely redo a part if it doesn't work. If you look at the old masters and they take the x-rays of them, you can see the underdrawings underneath where they change things. And I like to give myself that option also. And I also think it makes you much freer because so many people get tied up kind of in the beginning stages. Do these two fabrics go together? Is this really something I can use together? Yeah, just put them together. It doesn't matter. And as I'm getting further along in the stages of working something, I take it off the machine and I put it on the design wall. So I see it up first thing in the morning. When I wake up, I go out and look at it. Because it gives you a fresh perspective. And also when you're looking at something, it's kind of a difficult part of fiber art, because when you're looking at something that's in front of you and you're this close to it, you don't see the full picture. And I think it's very important to analyze the whole picture multiple times as you're making things. Yes?
What kind of machine do you use?
I have an ancient Bernina, and I also have a track-mounted, adapted, stretched, regular straight stitch machine. It's called a Voyager. So it's a Singer industrial straight stitch machine, and it's like 17 inches, and it's on a track. And I really kind of need that because I can't do free motion sitting down on a little machine. Just something I never learned to do. And also, I think of kind of in a bigger picture. I'm not very good, I'm not very accurate at like filler patterns. I'm much better at, you know, big, I think of the stitching almost as contour drawing, you know, from art school, is trying to create the shapes with the stitching. So I need to see a bigger area, and I need to move freely. It sacrifices accuracy, but, you know, too bad. That's my trade-off. And my machine also, it is a regular sewing machine, so I don't have the visibility that you would with the long arm. I don't have the little foot that comes out. It's like, I kind of can't see when I'm... Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know, you're so innovative, did you look into lighting your fabric? Or do you have any concept of that? Because I feel in the future we're going to have lighted fabric. And
I would totally love to do that. And I'm just too lazy to learn how to do it. But they have classes out and everything with the LED lights. And you know, classes on how to do it, and they sell little kits, and it's almost like thread, you know, the wires that are in it, so you could do that. And in fact, I made a thing a couple of years ago that had fireflies in it that I desperately wanted to light, but I didn't. But I did make them with glow-in-the-dark paint. But yes, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think that is something that may be coming into the future.
It already exists.
Oh yeah, with people doing it more and more. A friend of mine, Cheryl Salota, yes. Oh, I love her. She's kind of in the forefront of doing technology and combining, you know, these kind of things, lightings with quilts and everything. And another friend, Regina Benson, I know has done some of that with her pieces. She does things that are discharging like fire, and she's put the orange lights in it. I think it's a great idea. So the other, yes?
You were talking earlier about a couple of things. You mentioned batting or sandwich, making your quilt sandwich, the traditional way of it, but do you have a favorite batting? And the other thing is, when you print these large fabric pieces, obviously you have to take them to fabric.
No.
You know, they have
it.
They have it.
Yes.
Where
Yes,
is it?
they have it. There are several places. I send mine away to Spoonflower, and you do it all online.
Yes.
And they have over a dozen different types of material. This is one story. You can have them make your t-shirts. So I use a silk if I can, which is smaller, and this is it's organic cotton settee, and I use this because it comes 52 inches wide, and I would rather work bigger. And we were talking about the differences between these two. Now this one is, you know, it's completely done from the painting that I have, and if you look at it closer, you can see some of the, I call it post-production, you know, when you kind of color it after you sew it. So I'll use marker, I'll use colored pencil, I'll use paint. So there's a lot of that in here. And then I made these. And these are all out of another kind of non-woven material, and I sewed them on the top. And I really worked to get a gradation, color gradation in each one, so they looked more three-dimensional. And then this one is the last of the series I did, I think. And it has, again, it kind of harkens back to these, where I'm having the positive and the negative tell the story with each other. Here you have kind of a purple-red background with green on the top, and here it is reversed with instead of circles, it has, well, instead of, you know, this network, these circles form the design. So it is the same colors and the same kind of pattern, but done in a completely different way. So I wanted all these different parts of this quilt to talk to each other with the different designs that they had on them. So this one I kind of had printed, and then I took some of the non-woven material and covered big areas of it, like this whole thing is covered. And I did that before I started stitching it.
How do you hide the edges of the non-woven fabric?
Well, you don't have to. See, that's why I use it. It's not a very nice material. You know, it's like white, plain material. But you can paint it, and you can, when you cut the edges, there's no wrapping, there's no fraying, and it's so thin that if you sew it enough, you can blend it in with that fabric. Because I don't want things, I don't want things that are sticking out or hanging off or attracting any attention to themselves. That's my main thing. I want you to see the whole thing, and I don't want you to think, oh, that thing's hanging off. Yes.
Because you can paint it and you want to paint it so that you can't see through it, what if you paint it, do you also paint it so it's translucent and you get to see what's behind it and you still get some color on the top?
You could.
Okay.
You could. There's other materials that I would use instead. There's thinner materials. This particular material is not that nice to be transparent. I mean, you could use a transparent organdy or, you know, silk or nylon or something like that. I do really love transparency, and I use it a lot. But I don't usually use a remake for that. But then again, I have a giant wall of different materials. I'm always experimenting. People will give me things to experiment with, like, oh, my table came wrapped in this weird stuff, see what you can do with it. So I don't have a whole collection of things. I just have to make sure it's going to last. But, yes?
How long did it take you to do that?
I generally make about 2 pieces a month. But it is, you know, that's what I do. My son is an adult, and he does all the house cleaning. That's kind of why we live in a bubble. But yes, and that's a very good point, because I did not start doing it full-time until 2004. I ran the ceramic tile business for almost 20 years, and I founded it in 1976 and sold it in 94. And the reason I sold it is because my son was getting ready to go into kindergarten, and I wanted him to not grow up in Southern California. So, so we moved to Albuquerque, and we share a house with my sister, who's a doctor, because I felt that it was important for him to be around another adult. But I was busy being a mom, you know, and I have sewed all along. I've sewed since, you know, my mom's feather days. But that's when I started doing full-time, when he was older.
You're talking when you need a early Mary Mecco fabrics.
Yes. I love Mary Mecco, and we were talking earlier, there's a Swedish lady named Gudrun Schoden that designs things with stripes and polka dots, and we were talking about that in the fabric store. And I got a couple of things and it's like $150 a top. So I thought I will just make some. So this is from Spoonflower, and you can get them to make anything you want. You know, send them, you email them your files. And pay lots of money, and then it comes in the mail. Well, yeah, but you know, people kind of gasp when you say, oh, I use a lot of silk and use that. But if you, sorry, fabrics for people, but if you work a lot from the raw materials, which is what I do these days, almost all is everything is made by me. You can, that would work instead of, getting, 8 yards of $12 fabric, $12 yard fabric for your quilt. If you make your own, you can make it so it all goes together, so you don't have to get so many different kinds.
I am fascinated and absolutely obsessed with your center quilt. You have got to discuss that because I'm focused on that and going, never mind, I wrote that.
This is interesting, and this comes from living in LA. One night, we were awake, and then the earthquake happened, so we're standing in the doorway, which I guess you're not supposed to do anymore, but we're standing in the doorway. I saw myself with my own eyes. I saw lightning coming out of the ground. So this is part of that kind of Fractured Earth series, and I did several of those. And it also comes from my basic first memory from when we lived in Japan of the earthquake. And it, knocked half our house down. And it was okay because we're going to stay in the neighbors. It's okay. But I remember my mom, kind of trying to, present a good face on it. Everything, she's really scared and she's being really cheerful. That's interesting. And this one has won a ton of awards too. But this, like I said, this is one of the series I made 5 or 6 of these. But it's the 2 quilts on top of each other idea. I started with the concept of the top thing, and I knew that I wanted to do something like this. So the top is basically a piece of, it's probably white batik. I don't use like regular cotton that much anymore. I kind of collect the white on white batiks because I think that they are more subtle when you paint them. But I did the flower paste resist technique, where you put flower paste on it, let it dry, and you get this kind of crackly effect, which I love, because every time you get a commercial print, there is a repeat somewhere, even if it's a batik, and your eye will see that repeat. But with doing the crackle technique, there is no repeat anywhere, and I think it looks more natural. And again, it's the idea of the fractals, where you have the same shapes, the closer and closer and closer you get, you have the same shape, and then you pull away, and you will still have the same shape. So this meta shape here is repeated again and again. And you'll see the same shape in rivers. You will see the same shape in tree branches. You will see the same shape in veins and capillaries. So it is a very natural shape to me. So I started off with the concept of making the layers separately. So I made the top piece, completely quilted it, then cut it apart. And these edges are turned edge. So, I turn the edges under, and then I made this bottom piece and painted it so it would have a focal point of the colors changing, and it has that kind of round stitching in it, which is one of the only kinds of stitching I can really do. You won't see me making, feathers or anything, because I'm not very good at it, but I can do the round circles and I can do long things, so that's what it goes down to usually. Yes.
The quilt that's underneath that, is that totally quilted behind all of it?
It is, and the reason that I do that is because structurally it holds better together better that way. They hang better, you know, to try and even out the quilting. So all of these, this one and this one and this one, are all done the same way. And
How are the top pieces attached to the back?
hand stitching.
Yes.
Now this one's hand stitched on because I wanted the edges to be free, and the rest of these are machine appliqued. I machine applique them, turn edge applique, just like you would a little small thing, only I'm appliquing a quilt to another quilt. Yes?
I'm sorry, but I have another question. You said you quilted this on a piece of felt, the center?
The center
And then
oval.
when you attached it to the back piece, you applicated, did you then stitch it through all the way so that?
There are some parts of it that are stitched all the way to get lots of dimension, yes.
Others
Yes.
would pull forward too, that would be my.
Yes, I definitely, yeah, there's parts of that, like where the little circles are in the center, that I stitch. So then you get an extra, extra dimension because you have basically 2 quilt layers. But yes, yeah, I'll definitely do that. Was there another question over here? Oh, yes, you have it.
I just back to the center.
Yes.
Did I understand you that you put the center part, the brown part, you have to paint that, and
Well-
then painted it, or you painted it first?
No, this is a white piece of fabric that I sewed and I painted.
So you painted it while it was on,
Oh, yeah.
after you.
Yeah. This batting back there too, with the Purkinje cells, is done the same way. That is actually a big piece of hemp. And the reason that I used hemp is because it's loosely woven, and I thought it would be easier to hand sew, which is. But anyway, it's completely hand stitched, and it's white. I used white string and white hemp. And then I laid the thing out on the ground outside and sewed it with the hose. And I took the paint and I put the paint underneath it. So it's got dark gray paint underneath the whole thing. And then, now this does not work with dye. The paint migrates, the pigment will migrate to the areas that dry first. So the design, the black and white design on the background is really kind of a design that made itself. The parts that dry first, since we're in New Mexico, which is land of the dry, the parts that dry first are around the outside. So that's why the outside is darker. But yeah, that was kind of like, oh yeah, spend like a month hand stitching something and paint it.
I have a question. You can cover the quilt police.
Over your,
I'm obsessed with, the backing. They always say when you're quilting, the quilting has to be, just the same on the back. And you say that after you're done quilting, sometimes you start adding.
look at that fabulousness.
No, but you start adding stuff. Do they start getting a little bit upset and say, no, wait a minute, this was done after the thing?
I generally don't put these in quilt shows.
You know.
Now, I have
You're
another,
a quilt national.
yeah.
And
There's no, there's
they're
no.
okay with it.
And believe me, there are police and worse.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think more police any day. No, I don't usually put these in quilt shows. I usually put these in art shows. I'm doing more and more all media shows. I don't just do fiber shows. If you go, there's several call for art services you can subscribe to that will tell you the shows that are coming up, and you find things that will take fiber and that are all media. And I really enjoy participating in those. And I think they look fabulous, seeing sculpture and, painting and drawing and all that thing in one show with kind of a unifying thing, I think is really cool. So I do that a lot. I do, as Catherine said earlier, I do other things that I put in quilt shows. I brought one that is fresh out of a quilt show for my sample for the class, and it's fish, because I figured that here we are, by the ocean. quilt place, no one has ever said anything about that. You can tell because there's stitching on the back, which is an applique stitch rather than the regular quilt stitching, but they haven't said anything about that ever. So maybe they haven't noticed. But that's really, it has not been a problem. But, yes?
When you do your hot knife,
Uh-huh.
do you have little containers of all the stuff that you hot knifed out? Because they're already painted in food?
You could. You could. And actually,
Yeah.
that's what these are.
Okay.
I would actually probably have several cubic yards of it if I saved them all. So, and plus you have to turn them over and make sure they're the right side down. And I'm not patient enough to do that. So, yes, you could. And you can also, there's a lot of other things you can do with them, because you can use punches on them. And you can punch out shapes, you know, if you're into that kind of thing. So you can make like millions of polka dots. And I wanted to talk about some of these in the back. This one, if you can kind of conceive of this one, and then you can kind of mentally shrink it down into different units of that. That's what that is. But that is, each one of those round units is made separately, quilted separately, and then it's sewn onto that background. So those are all kind of a raised relief thing onto that background. But yes, so I would do that, is play with the scale a lot. Again, going back to fractals, it's the same small as it is big. So this one is that spread all over, and this is that one condensed into multiple different parts. And then this one on the left is another experimental one. This is when I was into making all kinds of multiple part things. But there is no non-woven material on that. That is all painted in. The background is quilted and then painted again. And if you look on the outside, you can really see, if you get up closer and look, you can really see where green paint on the outside kind of puddled up and it kind of wrinkles in each piece. So I did a number of things like that and came back and colored it later with markers and so forth. And then the top part is silk and it is stenciled. And I'm always trying to work with color gradation in there. To me, that's very important. When you go outside and you look at the ocean and it's a different color on the horizon than it is close to you. Everything changes all the time. You won't hardly ever go outside and see something that's flat color. So most everything I do has the color changing. This is changing from red all the way to white. You know, all parts of this are changing. So almost everything I do has a color modulating all through it. Does somebody else have a question? Yes.
I did, in this piece we were talking about, that you quilted the back and then you colored it.
Yes, one with the four. Yes.
So how do you get orange around every one of the dots? You paint that.
Oh yeah, no, you come in it with marker and do that.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So like first you painted it and it was orange going out to yellow and green.
Right.
And then you came in with a marker and went on
Yes.
all that orange around all.
Yes. Yeah. But you know what? It's, you know, that's part of the deal. You know, it's I never said it was, you know, anything any quicker than anything else. But if you stick with it, and I would urge everyone to do that, is when you know, learn something, learn a technique or learn something new, is stick with it and make the whole thing. And then you can learn from it instead of kind of giving up halfway. But yeah, that's so that's a white thing, quilted, then it's painted, and then it's colored in, the outsides of it's colored in. You can see here where I did a lot of the coloring in too. This is green thread on the orange background, but you can see where I did color on top of that. Also, and here, this is a good example up here. That's all colored in too. I'm incapable of sewing accurately enough to make that kind of design. So if I kind of made that, giraffe type pattern on something, I would not be able to sew it on the edges of it. So I sew it first and then color.
On that particular underground area where you have the open areas, along the edges, they're not laying flat. They're raised, so they almost look like they were burned.
They were. They were. This is a complete experiment. And again, I photographed this and I made other things from it. But this is a complete experiment. The background is 3 layers. It is, the regular quilt sandwich, and it has a top layer of a dark red batik. On top of that is a piece of polyester, I guess, some kind of artificial, I don't know, that I had. And I painted it in this, with the darker here going out to the light. And you can see it actually starts with a dark purple here and goes out to almost like me. So I painted it and then I sewed it, and you have to sew it with cotton thread, because if you use polyester thread, you will melt the whole thing and it will fall apart. So I sewed this whole thing together with cotton thread, and then I took a heat gun to it and I burned away the top. So the back could show through. And then the center part, I was kind of thinking about cactuses. We have cactuses. We don't have the saguaro cactuses, but we do have things, with those kind of repeated pokey patterns. So that's kind of what I had in mind. And these things are face cleaner pads. My son's girlfriend kept leaving them lying around in the bathroom, so I started snagging them and painting them, and they actually came out beautifully. So I used them. So that's these. And again, this whole center unit is made separately, and then it's attached to this background thing. And then it's additionally quilted around the edges of these little center things. Oh, the same, couple weeks. But yeah, and every single thing I do is an experiment. I'm always, trying something different, because if I did the same thing all the time, I would bore myself. So. I don't. Actually, we had a boutique store when I had the tile business. We made a little boutique store later on, a little manufacturing concern, because the kids did not have correct clothing, especially in those days, late 80s. So we had to make our own, so we did a lot of boutiquing. And a lot of the quilts I made back then are like scrap pieces of material. But no, this is a commercial boutique. And then this pattern on the top is actually taken from a photo micrograph of an iridium crystal. And it's all stenciled. This is just a stencil design, but I started with this dark batik. So that's just the batik by itself right there. But yes, I love dyeing, and I do a lot of dyeing, but I don't do batik. I've done some soy wax resist recently, but I haven't done like regular batik.
When you say that, Betty, we have a very avid clay group, and they're into crystalline glazes.
Oh yes,
And
absolutely.
that totally is an exploded
Absolutely.
view of what we've seen on some of the
And that is just what they look like, yeah. And I tell you, when I was in school, those crystalline glazes were like the ultimate. I mean, if you could do that, you could do anything, because it's very difficult to do. But yeah, I do look at photo micrographs a lot. I have done some crystals. That is just one of them. It's not really me, there's not really kind of enough circles in it for me. It is good to kind of take you out of your rut. Because I do tend to kind of end up in an eyeball. But yes, so I have done some crystals. I did a great big one with chromium crystal. So I just like all those different, I mean, it's amazing to me that these things can be, I mean, we're sitting on them, they're all around, you know, it's just the unseen, as you said.
I think that the questions can go on, and you can, you're welcome to approach Betty after the lecture, and we'll thank you.
Well, thank you